Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. So as Abby mentioned, this is going to be about using social media in a brandless category. So with that, I'm going to continue. Just a little bit about myself. So I come from the worlds of management consulting and marketing, and now have landed up in social media, my passion, which is quite evident from all these social networks in which I'm present. So if you need to follow me or ask me any questions, my alias on the internet is @SSSorab, so feel free to connect in any format you wish. So with that, let's start. Before we start, I have a quick question for you, which will be via a poll. So I would like to know from you what percentage of people you think actually listen to or believe in traditional advertising. And with that, you'll see a poll on your screen which you can vote on. So in general, what percentage of people do you think trust traditional advertisements? So once everybody's voted a little bit, we'll see what the result is, and this will lead to an interesting discussion. All right, looks like the results are coming in, and let's see the results. Well, it seems that most of you feel that it's 14% of people who trust traditional advertising, and some people believe in higher numbers as well. Okay, so those are the results. Now moving back to the actual webinar, we can see that most of you are actually correct. So most of you do understand that your advertising money is actually quite a lot, and it's being used wisely, I have to say, but it's not reaching as many people as, for instance, social media could. Because while only 14% of people trust advertisements, 90% of people trust online peer recommendations. Now, some other factoids about this are, which I'm going to show you shortly, are that 2 of 3 social media users believe that Twitter influences purchases, while 50% of people follow brands on social media, which is quite important because it shows that it's not just something that people use casually, it's something that actually influences purchase. It's actually something that's actively used, as well as the fact that 46% of social media users post brand-related content. This is slightly under half, which shows that in addition to brands, there's a lot more that people are talking about. So what does this imply for branded categories? It's kind of a small fish in a big pond scenario, because as you can see, there are so many brands and so many categories out there. What if you are in a category where there is no major brand or no key player? Maybe it's a fragmented category, or maybe it's a category in which consumers talk about the actual product more than the brand. So this brings up the question, what if I am brandless? And by brandless, we don't mean that you don't have a brand, but what if I'm in a category where the brand takes second place to the actual product? So what we did at Skim was we conducted field work, which is web scraping across the social media universe, focusing on butter and margarine for 1 year. And we'll show you why we picked this category, besides the fact that we love butter and margarine. But the objective here was to discover what you can learn about the overall category, understand how to impact digital communications, and develop actionable recommendations for margarine producers. Because what we hear a lot of in social media is that how do I make all of this actionable? So we're definitely going to show you how that's going to work. So first I'm going to take you through some background about how things came about. So just in terms of how this works is classical research focuses on asking-based questions. So you ask questions to your consumers, your target consumers, or anybody that you have identified. You get answers to those questions, and you perform an analysis and formulate a strategy accordingly. Social media monitoring scrapes the internet for whenever your brand is mentioned or anything that you wish is mentioned, and kind of plots it to see how much of that mention takes place on the internet, how positive or negative it is, and so on. Social media research goes a step beyond social media monitoring. It actually does a lot more than simply monitor, because it actually treats the data like classical research, only that instead of doing actual field work, asking questions, you have answers that are already out there. All you have to do is listen. So social media research is all about listening and formulating your strategy based on the more spontaneous, the more candid, the more truthful things that people are saying about your category or your brand. So for example, let's look at this, a tweet by me. Tried to make my favorite American cheesecake in New York a little bit more healthy by using margarine in the frosting. Obviously, I was upset by this because the cake turned out bitter. Now, if someone was reading this, someone like myself, a social media research expert at an agency, there's a lot that you could deduce just from this one tweet. You can see where I am. You can see the context of what I was making. Margarine is in there, which is a key word. You can see that I was unhappy about it by the emoticon, and you can see that taste-wise I had a negative perception. So already there's quite a lot that can be taken out of this. A few of the things in Margarine's Twitter feed show that people do actually talk about margarine quite a bit. But what's interesting is they don't talk about any brand per se. They always talk about the product, which re-emphasizes the point that this is perhaps a category where the product is more important than the brand. So now I'll quickly talk about the social media research method. So firstly, everything that's collected and analyzed on the internet is on the publicly available internet. So anything, any tweet, any Facebook blog, forum, anything at all is what we use to collect social media data per se. So now obviously not everybody, including myself, will reveal certain things about their demographic personality. So most people reveal gender, fewer people reveal age, and even fewer perhaps location. Now the way we get around this is we look at publicly available demographic data, but we also use IP tracking to get geographic data. And there's always an allusion to demographics in verbatim. So for example, if someone says, using real butter to make my 25th birthday cake for my party in Miami, you have a location, you have an age, and you have the butter there, so you can deduce quite a lot. So this is just a little bit of direction to show you how the method works. The method itself is a three-step method. First we design the study, then we conduct field work, so internet scraping and coding, and then customized analysis and output. So designing the study means looking for tweets like mine or anything publicly available for butter and margarine in our case. And as you can see, we find quite a few things like author, date, location, context, emotions, personality. Quite a lot comes out of this. The next step is to code all the sentiments on a 5-point scale, which we can see here. We also find out a lot about the consumer, demographics, psychographics, usage context, anything at all, anything that the objective of the social media research entails. And of course, there's emotions that we can deduce through words, emoticons even, and associations. After that, Skim performs a customized analysis and output, which is very, very similar to traditional research. So if you look at all of these strategies and all of these methods, they all look like they can be conducted through traditional research, but they can be conducted even more currently and even more almost accurately through social media research because people are talking more spontaneously. They're talking about things they believe in and not answering questions when we're doing this analysis. So things like identifying product flaws or coming up with new innovation ideas or perhaps understanding your target market psychographics or understanding your competitors because everybody talks about everything. These are all things that can be done through social media research. So now let's talk about the actual study, which will be used as a case study to exemplify the kinds of things we can do with social media research, not only in branded categories, so not only for a brand, but also for categories where there may not be a given brand. So now it's time for a second quick poll, which you will see on your screens shortly. And now we want to understand what percentage of conversations of butter do you think mention brand names? So of all the people talking about butter online, what percentage do you think mention brand names? And it looks like the results are slowly coming in, so we will see the results shortly. Okay, seems like a bit of an even split, and it's quite interesting, first of all, that all the options were under 50%. But let's look at what the actual result is back in the webinar. So as you can see, it's only 2% of butter conversations that mention brands and 9% that mention margarine brands. So indeed, we can see that this is a brandless category and that brands are not the most prevalent. So the kinds of things we wanted to find out through social media research were, where is this product, where are butter and margarine being mentioned? So usage is one way. So what we can see here is that they're used a lot in general cooking, makes sense, but margarine is used more in is used more in baking, and butter is used more in frying, which again contextualizes things for your butter and margarine producers quite a bit. If we're trying to look at a location context, we see that butter is talked about a lot in the kitchen, whereas margarine is used more personally and also at fast food restaurants as butter replacements and such, which again shows that there's slightly different views of where these two products are being talked about. Remember that they are substitutes, so this would be very important information for both butter producers as well as margarine producers, as well as oil producers, which is another segment altogether. However, what this shows is that there is a need to dig deeper because you cannot just understand the location and usage context. You would also need to understand what exactly is being said about these brands and how to quantify it and view it in a way that's made more actionable. So that's what we're going to look at now. So fact or fiction? I love my butter but not my margarine. Quite cliche, but let's see if social media can prove this correct. So what we did was we mapped all our social media conversations that we collected, so the over 50,000 of them in that 1 year that we did the study. We mapped them on this 2x2 matrix, something that's a favorite of mine. So on the x-axis on the bottom, we see increasing positivity of sentiment. So something that's less positive is on the left, something that's more positive is on the right. Passion, which is on the vertical axis, is described like this. So if I like butter, I am moderately passionate about it. But if I absolutely love it, I'm very passionate. And then obviously that translates into dislike and hate. So let's see where butter and margarine ended up on this quadrant. And we can see that butter is in the love quadrant. People love their butter, and a lot of people talk about it too compared to margarine. The size of bubble is representative of the actual volume of conversation, and people dislike their margarine, which not such good news for margarine consumers, and surprising news for butter consumers too, in that we know that butter consumption has been going down slightly over the years, but butter is still very much loved. So why is this? So in order to find out why this is, we looked at the taste versus health debate. And again, this is just an example of what can be done in social media research. Because this is a food category and a healthy food category, so to say, we looked at health and taste. But if you were looking at anything else, any other category, automobiles or personal care, anything at all, you could always come up with variables that could be plotted in this way. So if you plot taste, so low taste to higher taste, bottom to top, and then health, so less healthy to more healthy on the horizontal axis, you'll see that you come up with 4 logical quadrants. So if it's tasty and healthy, it's the best for me. If it's healthy but not tasty, it's good for me. And we all know some products that land in this category. If it's tasty but not healthy, my personal favorite guilty category, it's absolutely yummy. And then if it's neither, why bother? So let's see where butter and margarine land up on this space. So, no surprise, butter is yummy, and that's something that we could have deduced because people love things that are yummy, or relating to the earlier quadrant. Margarine is perceived as good for me, which is pretty obvious knowing that margarine is a healthy substitute to butter. But the fact that something so obvious is quantified and made real and tangible and actionable by social media research is what this exemplifies. So, clearly, there are pros for margarine producers as well as some things that butter producers could do keeping this in mind. But we did not stop here, and we continued exploring what it is that drives health and taste in these two categories. So what stands out about these spreads? the way to read this chart is that we have butter and margarine up top, and then we have different, let's call them attributes of taste. So things that people associate with taste, so tasty, salty, fresh taste. These are ordered by increasing importance in that tasty is talked about more often than salty, and spicy is talked about the least. In terms of color, we have a back-end regression algorithm which just plots the relative importance of each of these within the two products. So taste is a strength for butter, saltiness is a strength for butter, and both are a weakness for margarine. So that's the way to kind of read this, and then the rest become neutral and also unimportant. So what this shows is that butter has a forte in taste and saltiness, which are clearly very importantly perceived by consumers. In terms of health elements, butter has nutritions and vitamins. That's its strength, which is a weakness for margarine. But butter is, as we saw earlier, not perceived as healthy. This is its biggest weakness and is a moderate strength for margarine. And then we see things like low fat, no calories, things like that are a strength for margarine as well. And again, this kind of thing is now quantifying and very easily showing you how you can take things that people talk about on the social media space. So small things, big things, blogs, posts, tweets, forums, anything, and really convert them to something that is like traditional marketing research, because this is the kind of thing that you would get out of, let's say, a grid question if you were to ask this in a survey. Only these answers are probably a lot more accurate and candid. We also looked at just functional things. So again, the small size is considered most important, followed by the color of butter or margarine, followed by its use at hot temperatures, which again correlates with the fact that people use it for baking, frying in the kitchen. So what we see here is that butter has a strength at use at hot temperatures. That's where margarine doesn't do so well. Margarine is better for its greasiness or lack thereof, but then that is not really an important feature for consumers in general. So that's the way to kind of read this. And it's just quite interesting to see that there are different strengths and weaknesses in both that can be upplayed or downplayed. So who is doing the talking? The frequent chatters and the followers are who we want to see now. So keeping in mind what we said about demographics and such earlier, we see that it's a pretty even split of males and females, slightly more females talking about both butter and margarine, and even age-wise it seems pretty similar. But what we wanted to do was we also wanted to see which platforms are most effective. So what and in which different platform are each of these products talked about. So we can see that forums and blogs lead the way for both of them, but margarine is talked about highly in communities. So these could be health communities, they could be health-related or profession-related or mom communities, things like that. That's where margarine is actually talked about quite a bit, perhaps due to its association with recipe and recipe substitutes. So keeping this in mind and a lot more that we found out about consumers, we actually came up with consumer personas for butter and margarine. So for butter, we find that young and middle-aged consumers talk about butter. They talk mostly on forums and blogs. It evokes emotions of happiness, no surprise. They talk about taste elements. It is used in cooking and frying, especially to fry snacks. It is used during breakfast or as toppings at other meal times, like meats and burgers. And it is consumed in the household by men primarily, alongside the entire family. This alone is something that could have taken a long time and a lot of research to do, but social media also can give you this kind of response, perhaps in a more candid way, because here we're looking just at what people are saying on the social media web space and on everywhere on the internet, and deducing this kind of persona simply based on that. So it's actually quite powerful to be able to walk away with something so granular that it's actually very actionable. Similarly, for margarine, we have young and middle-aged consumers who talk about it, mostly on forums, blogs, and communities. They often talk about it as a substitute to butter and compare it to other oils too. They focus on areas of taste and health. Concerns include the debate of natural ingredients. This is why it may have not scored the best in health earlier, as we recall. Health issues include healthy meals, menu offerings, and weight loss. It is used in cooking, especially baking, and is used most often for breakfast, mainly on toast, and it is consumed by individuals or members of a household. once again, something very actionable that tells margarine producers about their target market, their product, about how it varies through the consumption cycle, and overall quite a lot that is quite alarming that you can get through social media. So coming towards the end, what do we take away from all this? Well, in terms of the actual objective we had, we see that butter is a healthy option with margarine is a healthy option with a low fat and low calories, which is non-greasy and easy to use. It's a substitute to butter and oils depending on messaging on the medium. In terms of the few weaknesses and development areas it has, margarine producers could develop perceptions of saltiness. This is something that's desired in the category. They could boost taste and freshness elements and introduce a creamy texture too. And of course, it's recommended to target by usage types because while butter was mainly used in the kitchen, usage of margarine varied a lot. What the study overall shows us is that in these categories, there's extreme preference behavior. People either love it or hate it. They understand it's healthy, but they really don't like the taste of it. There's also comparative behavior. People talk a lot about butter, margarine, oils, all as substitutes, so it's definitely something that's quite important. And we see, coming back to our brandless theme, that the product overpowers the brand. So often the concern that our clients have come to us with is that my brand is not one that people would talk about per se. So it's not your Coke, Pepsi, M&M's, Snickers. It's none of that. It's a brand that is more maybe functional or more maybe just part of a category like butter and margarine where people talk about the product more than the actual brand. So what do we do? Well, as you can see, there's a lot that can happen and a lot that can be said even if we're not looking at your actual brand, but at your category. And you can still learn quite a lot about your competitive landscape and about how your brand is performing. So for instance, to make things actionable, we can take this study and provide claims, which, as Abby had mentioned earlier, claims and communication testing is what we do. So for example, a lot of different claims can come up on this. Visually, it looks like a margarine pack, I hope. And we can evaluate these as perhaps a classical conjoint marketing research study. Or we can simply walk away with these ideas and say, hey, these are the ones that we will use in copy and in ad testing. So a creamy texture for cookies that taste perfect every time you bake. The words that are in bold show the kinds of things that margarine was good at. And so this is the kind of thing that can work quite well. So to sum it up, we suggest to use social media, branded or brandless. You can always learn from your consumers if you are willing to listen to them. And just to summarize, there's different kinds of ways, which we talked about earlier: ethnography, claims generation, a supplement to a study, or a campaign effectiveness, or even a standalone study. So big brand or small brand, social media will always tell you a story. All you have to do is listen. And with that, we come to the end of the webinar. And thank you for listening. I'll be happy to take some questions now in the 5 minutes we have left.
Great, Sarah. Thank you so much. And yes, I think we have some questions from the audience. Like I mentioned, if you haven't entered your question yet, you can, of course, feel free to still send it through and perhaps we can pick it up. I have a few here already. One of the questions was, they say one of the conclusions that you made was extreme preference behavior. And the question is this the case for all categories?
Interesting question. So I've definitely done this with a couple of categories, and it's not actually in all categories that I see this. In this category, we did see some extreme preference behavior where people were very polarized with their views. But in some categories, like mostly personal care ones, and then some, for example, an earlier webinar that I'd done, a chocolate one, there was not so much extreme preference behavior. People seemed to like similar things within the category, and then we had to focus our analysis on other things, which I can be happy to connect with later, or can give you a few examples of. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Great. That sounds awesome. Okay, I have another question here. what if I am not brandless, but in a category with only one big player, and I'm trying to create a niche for my brand? What should I do?
That's a great question. And what I would suggest there is that, so if you're in a category where there's one big player, the good thing about social media is that everybody talks about everything, and you're not bound to just do a study just on your brand. You can actually do it on a couple of brands, one of which can be this big player. So in that case, what I would suggest is doing a social media study on the category alongside the brand, or the brands in the competitive landscape, which include yours as well, and try to understand how they're competitively mapped out. So try to see what is a strength for which brand, and these are obviously all perceived strengths and weaknesses through social media research, and then try and see what is it that is lacking in the category or with the competitive brand, and then create your niche accordingly.
That's great. Well, I think that we're pretty close to the end of our time, unless you want to take one more question.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question here, and then we're going to close off. This is actually a really good one. My brand is apprehensive about social media. Do you have any tips for using it alongside other research? So maybe they're already doing some other market research, but what should they combine it with?
Great question, and we see this coming along quite a bit because social media research is obviously still a very growing field. I would definitely suggest getting your feet wet with it and trying it, and the easiest way to do that is complementing an existing study with it. So a lot of our clients have seen that the results from social media research match very well with classical research, so some diagnostic questions, psychographic, demographic, things that you would ask in traditional research actually match quite well with social media. So once you're given that kind of trust in social media research, it'll be easier for you to actually use social media as a standalone study. And as I showed in the example, if we do a lot of claims and communication studies, we can use social media for input on the claims. And then that has already showed you that you've used something that's being said by the consumers to do a study for the consumers, and it all ties in nicely.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all the time we have now. I appreciate everybody's questions and also your attention for joining us today. Please be sure to visit the website, skimgroup.com/webinars with an S. To download this presentation afterwards, we're going to put up an entire recording of the presentation, but also the slides for you to go through. And also there you can get more information about the upcoming webinars we have in the rest of this season. We have a spring cycle going on right now, and you're actually part of the first session. So you can also sign up there for our next webinar on March 14th, where we're going to be presenting the new method of menu-based conjoint through a fun as well as really practical case study about fast food curly fries. So make sure you don't miss it. Also feel free to contact either Syrup or myself with any questions you have. Our information is there. Our email address, also you can add us on Twitter in the same vein as this social media presentation. And on behalf of Syrup and myself, I thank you once again, and we look forward to hearing from you.